unfortunately, for too much of that time, we've just looked the other way because we wanted access to their markets, because their oligarchs were powerful players on the English legal scene and economic scene in this country. And I wish we had been more wise.
The Times is reporting that an alleged Russian spy lied to gain asylum in the UK before he worked for the Foreign Office, accessed British military and intelligence secrets, and met with the future king. The refugee from Afghanistan, who's accused of spying for Russia's military intelligence agency, also worked for GCHQ and MI6. He worked with two prime ministers and met Prince Charles and Prince William on visits to Afghanistan while working for the British government. He ultimately obtained both Russian and British citizenship. Well, the alleged spy, who can only be identified as C2, denies being an agent or that he's a risk to national security, but revealed that MI5 has accused him of being groomed as a Russian asset since the age of 5. He's appealing against the government's decision to strip him of his special citizenship. This is at a hearing before a special immigration appeals commission, and his case only came to light because of that hearing. He was stripped of British citizenship in 2019 after MI5, the security service, believed he was an agent of the GRU, which is the Russian military intelligence agency. Well, Bob Seeley is a Conservative MP on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. He's an expert on Russian warfare and co-chairs the All-Party Parliamentary Groups on both Russia and Ukraine. Good evening to you, Bob. Hello, Bob Seeley. Can you hear us? Bob Seeley, can you hear us? Good evening.
Yeah, I can hear you fine. Me.
Good to have you with us. What do you make of this story in the Times tonight?
Okay, well, first of all, it's a cracking story, so well done, The Times. Obviously, I can't comment specifically on the story because I don't know the facts of the matter. I would be tempted to believe MI6, SIS, because I think, look, it's a highly, highly professional organisation, and B, unless I have good reason not to believe them, I believe them.
It does appear as though he was able to use the fact that he was fleeing from the Taliban in Afghanistan in order to gain British citizenship ultimately. Do you think that that really raises some questions about the system there?
I think it does, but I mean, the problem is in chaotic countries, when times are desperate, you have to make decisions and you get them right a lot of the time and you get them wrong occasionally. This is why we have to be careful about who's coming here and under what grounds. I think there are two broader issues in relation to Russia. That firstly, clearly the Russians want spies in this country and they want to find out information because they believe that they've been in a conflict, a non-military conflict with us since really 2007. We've frankly looked the other way for too much of that time, but also because by reliving the good old days of the Soviet Union when they were in a superpower, even if their spies get rumbled, it makes the Russian leadership now feel that they are living with, toe-to-toe with the West, that they are in competition with the West, that they are a rival to the West in terms of values, in terms of great power status.
And do you think there are also questions for the government here about the vetting processes, how this alleged agent, we only know him as C2, apparently came to work for GCHQ, a very secret listening station, MI6, the Ministry of Defence and the Home Office?
If I understand correctly, Carol, he was an interpreter, wasn't he?
That was what he was doing in Afghanistan.
Okay. So clearly he's an interpreter. So he's not hiring spies. He's not agent handling himself. He's not making decisions over policy. So I think that's an important point, that he was simply translating, but clearly translating highly sensitive information. And clearly it is not a good thing if he was able to tell the Russians what he knew, what the British knew, what MI6 knew, etc. So, but this is the problem is that in countries like Afghanistan, when it is difficult to truly vet people, to truly know people, you have to make human decisions, and sometimes you get them wrong.
It appears that he told a court that he had lied on his asylum application and that when he applied to GCHQ, he was given developed vetting, which is the advanced form of security clearance. Is it a surprise to you that he could have got through?
Yeah, I mean, slightly with developed vetting because I mean, okay, when I was in the military, I went through DV process, and it does take some time, and they're meant to look into your background quite carefully, and they go and talk to other people around you. I mean, it is still possible. I mean, obviously, I hope in my case I passed all the relevant tests and what have you. Clearly, no DV process, no developed vetting process is perfect, and in a country like Afghanistan it is frankly difficult to do substantive and real digging on somebody because there's such sort of cultural barriers. If you're interviewing people's families, even if you've got to be able to do that, they're not exactly going to level with you if there's anything suspicious about their brother or their cousin, etc. So a DV, I mean, I can imagine the DV process being difficult to do on people from Afghanistan or people from Iraq, for example.
Is it a further indication of the real threat that Russia poses to this country, not just in terms of the direct threats, cyber threats, but of Russian spies, something we have lived with, of course, for a very long time?
Yes, the Russians, the Putin's regime effectively declared this new Cold War back in 2007 when Putin said he no longer recognized the international system. He said he wanted to change it. He said he wasn't happy with it. This was after several assassinations, potentially up to 14 in this country, and a lot of hostile activity. And then clearly you had the first stage, or indeed arguably the second stage of the Ukrainian war in 2014. And unfortunately, for too much of that time, we've just looked the other way because we wanted access to their markets, because their oligarchs were powerful players on the English legal scene and economic scene in this country. And I wish we had been more wise, that I wish we had developed our defences much more when we saw what was happening from 2007, rather than being in the situation where we are now, where everyone is suddenly talking about conflict with Russia, conventional conflict, war, not the sort of economic, political, informational war. And I wish we were in a position where we were better prepared, but sadly, we are where we are.
Is this just embarrassing for the government, or do you think there is the possibility that quite serious damage has been done given the sort of access that he apparently had?
Okay, some damage has been done, Carol, but this guy, as I say, unless I've misunderstood, this guy wasn't making policy. He wasn't agent handling. He couldn't necessarily. The amount of damage he could do was potential. He could hand the names over of who we were talking to, what they were saying. So he could be of potential use and value to the GRU. One shouldn't overstate his case. Although he had access, he wasn't policy making. He wasn't agent running. So from that point of view, there's some damage, but it's limited. It's not like the Cambridge Five back in the 50s and 60s. The wider picture, as you say, we're in this battle of we're in a conflict with Russia, and we need to get wise to it. I don't think these things happen, and I'd rather be reading about it than not reading about it from that point of view. But on the whole, I think we have, by the standards of many other people, including the Russians, the GRU have really quite sloppy security standards nowadays, and I think ours broadly are much tighter.
Bob Seely, a Conservative MP on the Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining us.